So for the past couple seasons under defensive coordinator Joe Barry, the Green Bay Packers have not lived up to the expectations that many of us Packers fans have had for them. When you look at the amount of draft capital the Packers have spent on the defense, most of their first-round picks over the past 5 to 10 years have been on defense. And to see the past couple seasons the Packers underperform had many wondering if Joe Barry was the problem. Would he be able to lead this unit to success in 2023. And so it was a good test against the Bears in week 1, even though they were real bad last year with Justin Fields. They were still one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. And so I was curious to see, how does this team play in their first game with a lot of new talent, a lot of new players here, especially when you look at the defensive line with Dean Lowry and Jaron Reed gone, 2 veteran interior defensive linemen. You have Devontae Wyatt filling in, second-year player. You have Lucas Van Ness coming in. You have Colby Wooden, interior defensive lineman drafted in the 4th round this year. In all, this defensive line played out of their mind. They had, I think, 36 pressures according to PFF in this game against the Bears, which ranked second to only the Dallas Cowboys. So they were consistently getting pressure on Justin Fields all day long, and that was what I was hoping we would see, that this defensive line could take that leap forward with a guy like Devontae Wyatt coming in, filling in for Dean Lowry. And Dean Lowry was a guy who, he didn't really get injured. He was always there, veteran player, sort of knew what he was doing, but did not really play well. He didn't have that upside that a guy like Devontae Wyatt, drafted in the 1st round, had. And so to see Wyatt in this game lead the Packers in pressures, 6 pressures, the Packers have not had a guy to pair with Kenny Clark on the interior of the defensive line to rush the passer. For years, Dean Lowry didn't do much. Jaron Reed last year didn't do too much. But in his first game, Devontae Wyatt, first game of this season, comes in and dominates. Then you look at Lucas Van Ness, who the Packers said they wanted to, get some work this season as the first-round pick, especially with Rashawn Gary injured and limited in snaps in week 1. But I was honestly pretty surprised at how many snaps Lucas Van Ness played. He actually played 35 snaps, which was 47% of the defensive snaps, and he finished with the second most pressures on this defense with 5 pressures. So in the preseason, he didn't do too much. He had a few nice plays here and there, but it wasn't like out of this world. But we saw what Lucas Van Ness can do in week 1, especially that one play where he chases down Justin Fields. Fields can't outrun him, which just shows how insane of an athlete Lucas Van Ness is, that at his size, he was able to track down Justin Fields. And one other interesting note, if we look at these edge rushers, same thing with the interior defensive line. The Packers had a pretty good rotation going. There weren't a lot of guys getting a majority of the snaps. If we look at edge rusher, the highest percentage edge rusher when it came to snaps was J.J. Enagbare, with 55% of edge rusher snaps. Van Ness, 47%. Preston Smith, 47%. Justin Hollins, 34%. And then Rashawn Gary at 16%, only playing in 12 snaps. So Enagbare and Van Ness played the same and more snaps than Preston Smith, which was interesting. And Van Ness played well. Enagbare played not quite as well as Van Ness, but still played okay. So it's awesome to see the Packers consistently getting pressure with that rotation going, so all those guys stay fresh. And basically the same thing happened with the interior defensive line. If you look at percent of snaps there, TJ Slayton, 54% of snaps. Kenny Clark, 51% of snaps. Colby Wooden, 4th rounder, 49% of snaps. Devontae Wyatt, 41% of snaps. And then Carl Brooks, I think he was 6th round, I believe, or 5th. I think it was 6th round, 39% of snaps. So they really split that up as well. And so to see them have just as much success with some of these, quote-unquote backup interior defensive linemen and backup edge rushers was very, very good to see. And I know the Bears, they're not the greatest offensive line, and there's going to be a lot tougher tests for this Packers defense. But to see what this D-line did this year, or in his first game, was very promising for the rest of the season. And I do think that was the one area where I was wondering, with Lowry gone, with Jaron Reed gone, if Devontae Wyatt can take that jump and these other young players can play well, I think that's sort of the key of this Packers defense taking that next jump and becoming a very solid defense. Because for years and years, we struggled to stop the run, and that did not happen yesterday. If you take away Justin Fields' runs, which obviously he played well, I think he had like 6 carries for around 60 yards. But if you look at the rest of the rushing attempts for the Bears, they only ran the ball outside of Fields for 63 yards at 3.15 yards per carry. So the Packers defensive team played really well against the run outside of stopping Justin Fields, which almost no one can do consistently just because of his athletic ability. So that was great to see from the running defense. And then if we take a look at one other thing to end with the defensive line, Derek Carragher posted on Twitter this interesting stat. I saw he said this. Here's a new wrinkle of the Packers defense. Green Bay called 7 pass rushing stunts per game last season. They just used 28 stunts against the Bears yesterday, most in the NFL by a wide margin. So one of the things that seemed to lead to the Packers' success was the use of stunts on the defensive line, where they basically just flip spots as they rush. One guy comes around like that. And it works really, really well lots of the game. And so you'd assume that the Packers continue this as they go forward, considering they found so much success in that area. And then in the passing game, the Packers secondary played really well. Justin Fields only averaged 5.84 yards per attempt all day long. Only had 2 plays over 20 yards, and they were around 20 and maybe 23. So no really huge explosive plays by this Bears team. And then DJ Moore only had 2 receptions, and I believe it was for about 25 yards, I believe. So the Packers defense secondary, majority of the day, played really, really well. And going forward, we'll see if they can keep this up against teams that have more elite offenses, because while the Bears did make some changes, bringing in DJ Moore this offseason, adding some players along the offensive line, they still were one of the worst last year. And yesterday, or whenever the game was on Sunday, the Bears offense did not look elite. But the Packers defense played with intensity, played with physicality, flew to the ball, really got there fast and quickly, more so than last season. Darnell Savage played really well, in my opinion, led the Packers in total tackles with 10. And so it was a very promising start for a Packers defense that all of us have been hoping for years and years can finally reach that top tier level. And this is just one game, but we'll need to see it consistently. And we'll see what they can do again next week against the Falcons, who are a very, very run-heavy team. But that is my breakdown on this Packers defense. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you want to get more Packers content, I have a Packers newsletter where I break down other things. You can click the link in the description and enter your email to receive that. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.